Quite often, our family members, our friends, our acquaintances try to dissuade us and convince us that our chosen path is wrong. It's a mistake. It won't work. And they give us this advice so that we would save our time and we would avoid disappointment. They are giving us the impression that they want to protect us and they want to support us and serve in our best interest. And in this video, I'm going to share examples why quite often it is not in our best interest to follow other people's advice, especially if it's not asked. But Yanis, what if our chosen course of action turns out to really be a mistake? Shouldn't we then follow the advice that is given not to take this step? One of the first things that we have to understand is that even if our chosen course of action later turns out to be the so-called quote-unquote mistake, quite often this mistake it has a huge value. It has a huge benefit for our own growth. And it is needed that we go through this shite. It's really needed for us to gain this valuable experience. And through this valuable experience, we gain important life lessons. We have a chance to break unhealthy old patterns, limiting patterns. We have a chance through this shitty experience to break illusions that we were living through, these illusions, aka distorted perception of reality. And through this shitty experience, we usually experience a harsh contrast. And through contrast, we are given opportunity to change. And yes, quite often, this shitty experience is also a divine guidance. So it's not always rainbows and nice and sexy experiences. Now imagine for a second that we're supposed to go on this bumpy road that would move us closer to our greater version and closer to our true purpose of life. What would happen if someone else gave us advice to avoid this bumpy road and would stop us from taking this course of action? What would happen? And even if their genuine intention is to really support us and help us, in the end, it would still turn out as a huge disservice to us, right? We would stay in our comfort zone, or in other words, we would maintain this unhealthy status quo, and that would lead us to no change at all, or slow change, or delayed change. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I would rather choose encouragement to go forward, even if it later ends for me in a bad shitty place, but there is still great value that I can take from that. I would rather choose this encouragement to go forward, not knowing where I will end up and what my journey will be like, rather than discouragement not to move forward, rather than skepticism that can lead to doubts about my own abilities, and that can be very paralyzing. A lot of times people who give us especially unsolicited advice, they lack self-awareness, and self-awareness also includes their own deeper hidden intentions behind why they choose to give us this advice. And it is common that the ones who try to protect us or rescue us on a deeper subconscious level, they actually try to prove themselves as worthy. And it's a childlike behavior. It's like inner child who craves approval. If rescuer would be aware enough of the other person, he would recognize that his advice that encourages maintaining status quo would actually do more harm to the other person than good. But on a surface level, rescuer may look like a caring adult, even though quite often there is this inner childlike part that wants actually approval by offering good advice. I want to share with you two real life examples that shows us that people often give their advice to us from their own pain, and those advices limit us big time. First example is about interaction between stepfather and a stepson. Stepson has contemplated enough and real hard to make sure that the next job he finds will really suit his best interests, because stepson has had enough bad work experiences in the past, and so he really wants to make sure that he doesn't repeat the same experiences again. For the stepfather, this stepson's behavior seems irritating. Stepfather thinks that his stepson is too picky, and he's rather lazy, uncommitted, and not serious enough about wanting to work. But stepfather thinks that stepson is more focused on the surrounding conditions of living and work than the work itself, and then the earning money itself. And for the stepfather, it's irritating and it's even triggering. Stepfather gets triggered by his own inner pain that is activated by his stepson's different point of view that is associated with how he perceives employment. And this pain of stepfather has been long suppressed, and stepfather is not really into personal growth, and he really doesn't want to admit this pain. But it is really noticeable externally through interaction and through communication. And stepfather's ego wants to convince both himself and the stepson that all he wants to do is really support the stepson, nothing more. And he's not sure why stepson is not agreeing with him. Part of the stepfather's ego is identification with his views about hard work, and that you cannot most of the times choose what you want to do in life, and work is just work. It doesn't have to be pleasant. And his stepson's viewpoint is different, and that's why it challenges stepfather's identity, and this is being perceived as threat, to a point that stepfather even gets angry and sometimes uses passive-aggressive remarks directed to his stepson, sowing doubts, rejecting his stepson's perspective. Why? Because stepfather also was once a young man who had his own dreams, but soon enough state authorities made him forget about his dreams and find a regular job. And stepfather even unconsciously, one of his parts hopes that his stepson fails, so that he would later turn out to be, so his stepson would turn out to be wrong, that he didn't listen to his stepfather. At the same time, stepfather fears that his stepson would prove that you can actually earn a decent amount of income by doing what you like and by being picky and choose specifically how you want to earn an income. Stepfather fears that if that would turn out to be right, then that would be a harsh reality check for him. And it would be a huge blow to his old identity and how he has chosen to live his life. And stepson's success would be like a thistle in his eye, reminding stepfather that he in his youth decided not to pursue his own dreams, his own desires, and because he thought he couldn't do it, and so stepfather didn't realize himself in the way that he would have wanted to. So stepfather stays in denial of this fact, and he's in full resistance. Change of belief can literally be perceived as a death threat, and younger generations with higher consciousness are here actually to challenge older generations and their outdated and unhealthy ways that are no more serving humanity and that are no more relevant to our new way of living, because our consciousness is rising on a collective level, and so the old structures often seem threatened, and they feel and think that they will be put out of use, and that's why they are often resisting to new things. And so that's why we don't need to wonder why so many obstacles come up in our life. The second example is about interaction between young man Jason and an older businessman called Daryl. Now Jason is looking for solutions how to reach out to international market. He has goals and vision, and one of the first ideas that comes up into Jason's mind is that as a solution or a step towards solution is to reach out to his acquaintance Daryl that he once met on the internet, because he knows that Daryl has an international experience, so he might lead Jason to next steps, what to do. When Jason reaches out to Daryl, who he hasn't spoken a year or two, he quickly gets shocked. Daryl is not only extremely dismissive of Jason's vision, but gets also very rude, even to a point of insulting Jason's girlfriend. So it gets very heated and very ugly quickly. And Daryl has become a millionaire, from small businessman to millionaire. But inside, Daryl is still not happy, and the big money has not fulfilled himself from the inside. And Jason is a pretty aware guy who is working with himself constantly, and he feels that this aggression from Daryl comes not because what Jason said, but it's a deeper. It comes from Daryl's own soul's pain. Daryl was also once thinking about reaching his goals, his dreams, his desires, and he was a striving young man to fulfill them. But somewhere along the way, he got deviated and he ran away after a quick opportunity to earn large sums of money, forgetting his original dream. Jason's vision is triggering Daryl, who sold his soul to get rich quick scheme, and Daryl did not realize his own true inner desires. Hasn't realized. And Daryl calls Jason naive to think that it's possible. An idealist who will end up shitting himself and is not practical. That's what Daryl thinks about Jason. And in truth, Daryl's so-called practical million business was a distraction to his unrealized original plan. And now someone comes in Daryl's life daring to dream. It's impossible for Daryl to acknowledge that. Daryl is hurt that he didn't continue to try to fulfill his dreams, and here is someone who is doing that, so it hurts. Now, what are the lessons from these two examples? Beneath these other people's efforts to dissuade us from our chosen steps can be found selfishness and people-pleasing. I'm not saying always that I'm not saying that it happens always, but it happens more than we can imagine. And it applies to our relatives and close ones too. I will use the word parents as example to highlight this, what I mean. But of course it applies to other people as well. Now, our parents who are often worried about us, they will feel good when we're doing well and safe. At the same time, if our parents' well-being is dependent on how we are doing in life, it puts us at least partially responsible for their own well-being and how they feel. That's not our job at all. And parents will often feel more comfortable and safe if their offspring will adopt their ways and beliefs of how they see the world. But these beliefs might not be empowering to their offspring at all. They might be contradictory to their heart desires, even if their mind tries to justify following their parents' advice. It is not uncommon that there is a lack of coherence between our mind and our heart. So mind tends to override our heart, and we allow ourselves to be persuaded by others easily. We have to understand that quite often people who give advice to us do not feel our heart, what we feel in our heart. And they don't even feel their own hearts. They're only able to project from their own or other people's mental space. So that's not really a valid advice. So selfishness means that advice givers or rescuers want to feel good themselves on a deeper level, and sometimes that can be achieved unconsciously at the expense of others. Even though on surface level advice givers would say things and convince themselves that they're helping us. And it requires awareness to see through layers and sense energy from which the advice is being transmitted to the other. And if we follow other people's advice that is not in our best interest, we are people-pleasing. And there are times we do it consciously, and there are times when we do it unconsciously. That is a form of manipulation as well. Because through pleasing others, we make sure that we have a predictable outcome. And this outcome is that the other people are pleased, they're not upset, and we avoid confrontation with them, and we gain their approval. And also they gain our approval. By doing so, we are not being honest at all with them, with ourselves, and how we really feel. And our mutual relationship is not authentic. It's a game of pretending. So selfishness and people pleasing are two common things that can be found often beneath someone's advice. I will end this video on a more optimistic view though. Even though if we take a decision to please others unconsciously or consciously, and that was not aligned with us, ultimately what it does, it will bring us closer to our alignment with our true inner desires, because through this hard contrast we become more aware what we really don't like, and we become more aware what we really do want. And yes, this might be longer and harder road than necessary, but at least we got our hard lesson.